Hi, I'm Ashley Hammond.
And I'm Locke Hammond.
We're married.
We run a business together.
And we homeschool our 4 kids.
That makes us sound a little crazy.
I think people might think we're a little crazy.
Well, through all that crazy, we're here to help you blaze your own trail through a world designed for conformity.
And break the chains holding you back from living an uncommon life.
This is Trailblazers and Chainbreakers. You always find a way to throw me off when we start. I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm ready to go. And then you say something and I'm like, oh, crap. All right.
I mean, that's kind of how I am.
Yeah. Well played, madam. We're talking fighting. I'm going to sit here and say mean things to you until we get in a fight and everybody can listen to that. And no, we're not going to do that. You're looking at me like, that's not what we talked about.
No,
we're talking fighting, talking conflict. I wanted to have this conversation because I think this has been one area that you and I have really improved in. And full transparency, in order to find that improvement, that means that we were like world-class dirty fighters in our relationship. But we've come a long way. And this is a conversation, this is a topic that's been coming up a lot for me and a lot of the guys that I'm talking to, a lot of the guys in the men's groups that I run, even just random conversations with guys anywhere I go, this idea of arguing better, fighting better. We've done episodes about how if you're not fighting, there's something wrong in your relationship. That doesn't mean like knockdown, drag out fights, but like there's got to be some kind of disagreement. So I don't think we need to pick that point across or pick that point apart, if I could speak English. But today I want to talk about fighting, doing it better, because it's inevitable that it's going to happen. And maybe we can start off by sharing a little bit of our pattern, of our story.
like how we used to be and still contend to be.
Yeah.
Well,
what's your trauma response? Like if you get in a disagreement, what are you inclined to do?
Well, shut down and run.
Yeah. So full on, not fight or flight is just flight.
Yeah, I detach and I run.
Yeah. So like that's your trauma response. It served you in your life, and as much as I love you, it's like the absolute worst thing for me. We have this thing in our relationship where your trauma response is like my deepest wound, and my trauma response in response to that is like your deepest wound. Mm-hmm. So you flee. We start to get in a fight and you're like, all right, screw it. I'm going upstairs. I'm leaving the house. I'm whatever. My response, my trauma response, because I have an abandonment wound is no, wait, let's figure this out. Let me follow you. Let me track you down. I know I need to let you go, but like there's a little boy inside of me that thinks he's dying sometimes. And so I'm like, okay, I'll behave. I'll be nice. Let's go fix this. 30 seconds into it, I've metaphorically put you up against a wall and we're fighting again.
Which, by the way, is not an accident that it's that way.
Oh, yeah.
You heal through, I heard something beautiful today, you heal through relationships. And it's like polar opposite ways of dealing with like fights and just hard conversations is like how you heal through that. And I think it's done. Well, I don't think. I'm almost positive that it's done on purpose that way.
I agree. I think if we didn't do the absolute worst thing for each other, we would have never come this far through it. And I would say we're perfectly made to trigger each other's deepest wounds.
Oh yeah,
is kind of how I'm thinking about this. So that's our pattern. So within that pattern, you running away, me following, trying to fix it, trying to calm everything down, good intentions, making it worse, and then you wanting to flee again, also with good intentions. Like, nope, not dealing with this. Let's stop. We would fight pretty dirty sometimes. We would say some pretty messed up things because we just didn't stop when we needed to stop. So that's our background. What would you say? And we can go all kinds of different directions with this. What helped you? What did you do to get out of that pattern?
I mean, I still naturally revert to that pattern. I think for me, it's such a hard answer to answer that. There's no like one size, one answer. I think it's multiple things help me get to that point. I needed to get to a point where like I stopped just thinking about myself. Like, to be honest, like I was like, this is how I feel. This is how I need to handle things. I don't really care what you need. Like, this is what I need. It doesn't matter what you need. And that's like the lens that I was coming at. Like, that's the lens I was seeing, like your perspective, how you felt. Honestly, like I didn't care because I was so deeply wounded emotionally, and just there was just so much stuff there to unpack that I hadn't unpacked. And I think over time, once I became more emotionally healthy, I was able to start to look at it from your perspective and your lens. Whereas like, you shouldn't need me to be like, I'm not leaving you. Like, I'm mad and I need to leave. But that is what you needed and where you were at. Like, I needed to meet you where you were at. And I wasn't willing to do that because I was just so unhealthy and just like unstable with my emotions.
Yeah.
And I think once I could get to a point where like, it wasn't all about me. Like, I was like, this isn't all about me. Like, this is like a joint connection. Like, this is a team. Like, I'm married and I don't want to not be married. So like, I have to make a choice whether I'm going to care about where he needs me to meet him. And like, if I don't, then we're not going to stay married.
I think you made a couple of really important points there. The first, or maybe not the first, I don't know what order you made them in. I think we'll come back to this one, so I'll just acknowledge it, but like needing to do the work. If both parties in a relationship, so if somebody's listening to this, like, okay, we're never going to stop fighting completely, disagreeing completely, but we need to do it better. Let's learn how to do it better. The first and most important point, we will come back to this, is you both need to be putting in the effort. If you're not both putting in the effort, then that's a whole nother conversation. You said something about always naturally going to revert back to this. I think that's another important point. Like, this is the way you are. There's nothing wrong with the fact that your natural inclination is to walk away. Actually, it's probably better than my natural inclination, as I've said many times, to chase you. But understanding that like that urge is always going to be there and should even often be listened to, but it should be handled a little bit differently. And same thing for me, like my urge is to resolve this now. That urge is totally fine.
Yeah.
It's how I'm going about doing it that needs to be addressed. And it reminds me of a quote. I don't know if it's a Gary Chapman quote. I'm not going to give proper credit. I'm not even going to say the quote right, but it's something like, the problem is not what you were fighting about, but how you were fighting. And so I would say the same thing with both of our kind of patterns here. The problem is not the pattern. The problem is not that you want to run away when we get angry. Pattern is not, or the pattern of me wanting to fix it is not a problem when we're fighting. It's how we go about doing that. If you dump on me and then run away the second I say something you don't like, that's still the same pattern, but that's handling it wrong. If I refuse to give you any time whatsoever and I'm like, nope, screw it, we're handling this now, and we just get in a bigger fight, obviously that's the wrong way to handle the pattern, and there are much better ways to handle it. So I think that's important. And then the other thing I wanted to say something to is the idea of team. I think that was huge for us. So like if I tried to answer the same question that I just asked you, how do we get through this? That's huge for me. If you asked me when we got married if I acted like we were a team, I would say yes. And I would believe it. You're laughing at me. Thank you. I would believe it. But we weren't acting like a team. And I don't say that to like shame us. I think everyone goes through this journey that you kind of hinted at of realizing we're all acting in our own self-interest. It's just basic human nature. And when you get married, you're committing to being a team, but I think very few people actually understand what that means in the beginning or even how to do it. And I know I didn't for like 7 or 8 years, maybe really understand what it meant to be a team. And that was really, really helpful in this, whether it's our pattern of how we fight or just fighting in general, understanding that we're a team. So like if we're fighting, we should be fighting for each other, for a resolution to this issue, we should not just be fighting against each other.
Yeah.
Understanding that, like, kind of like a chess move, if I really think I'm right and I think you're completely wrong, and that's why we're starting to get in a fight, because we both think that, the best way to convince you that you're wrong is to actually let you walk away, calm down, and handle it later in a appropriate way, instead of getting into a shouting match. And so understanding that, like, that team piece was huge, still is huge. So, like, yeah, you jam-packed a bunch of good stuff in there.
I think with the whole team thing too, and I don't want to get into like making excuses. And also, with that being said, I don't think a lot of this was modeled for us. I know it wasn't for me. Like, I didn't know what that was. And to be honest, like, I'm just, by my pattern of just like detaching and running away is what I grew up seeing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like what I naturally like revert to. I think also we live in a world, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole either, but we live in a world where it's like, we're so unregulated, like our nervous system, like being taught to like deal with emotions and even like identify emotions. Most people can't identify what the heck it is that they're feeling. Like if you ask them, like, what are you feeling? Like they don't even know, because we're just so dysregulated, always on our phones, always seeking something, always seeking information. Like we have no idea half the time, if we're mad at our spouse, what the heck it is we're mad at. And like, there's just so much going on. And I also want to touch base on what you said about, oh man, I just like had a blank spot in my brain.
Brain fart.
I just spaced out. I was going somewhere with that.
I'm sure it was going to be awesome.
It was going to be awesome.
Well done, hypothetically. Okay. So let's, you know me, I always want to get back to like practical action, things that we can do. I want to give a practical action step that was really important for me. And it's based around this idea of, I've had this conversation so many different ways. I like to think of it mentally for me as like an eject button, like in a fighter jet or something like that. But I've heard from men and women and everybody all across the spectrum. So we've already said you're prone to walk away, and that's probably a good thing most of the time. I've talked to guys who say in their relationship they're more prone to walk away, and their wife, like me, doesn't like that, and vice versa. So
it's actually more common and we read a book about this. It's more common for the guy to detach than the girl. The girl, usually the female, and this isn't like men versus women, but like this actually was proven in a book. Most men are more likely to not want to talk about it and shut down versus the woman. Not me. Yeah.
I'm very good at exploding about things. So I call it the eject button, but I want to talk about this idea of like, you can call it tapping out, you can call it walking away. For me, I imagine myself literally getting shot out of a fighter jet far, far away from the fight. I think it's important to say, like, you should always be able to walk away from a conversation going sideways. And I say that being the person in our relationship who gave you all kinds of shit for years about walking away and not being able to handle things.
I will say I agree with you on that. I think where that becomes wrong, and I couldn't admit this for years, is yes, I should be able to walk away, especially if the fight is stupid, which they normally are.
Aren't they all?
And we're like, just like getting louder and louder about nothing and like spewing a bunch of crap that doesn't need to be said, that it's going to hurt someone's feelings that we don't even really mean in the first place.
Yeah.
I think what needs to be said in that situation is like, I'm walking away from this because I love you, and we can talk about this later. Versus like, I'm just leaving because I don't want to deal with it. Like, okay, let's have this conversation when we're both not emotional. Like we say it about our kids all the time. Like, don't talk to a kid
Take a break
when they're emotional, because you're going to get nowhere. Same thing with grown-ups. We're big kids. Let's not have this conversation when we're emotional. And then I bet you 9 out of 10 times we'll come back and be like, we don't even need to have a conversation because that was just stupid. And why were we even fighting?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that piece in 1 second, because that actually is something I've been thinking about. The return, even if it feels stupid, I still think it should be talked about. But yes, I wrote it down this way and made a note to make sure we talked about it this way. You should always be able to or allowed to walk away. And that's the first point. The second point is, but it can't be used as a weapon. Mm-hmm. And you kind of hit on that a little bit just a second ago. There were times where the pattern started off, I didn't let you walk away. And we've already discussed that. But then there were also times after that where you knew how much it bothered me when you walked away, and we would start to get into it and you wouldn't like what I was saying and you would walk away knowing that it was going to hurt me. And so just like when you tried to walk away, I can't be like, oh, wow, real mature. Like, you're not going to try and handle this situation. Like, well, screw you then. In the same way that I would be trying to weaponize keeping you in the conversation, you have to be careful not to be like, here's what I think, and I'm upset. And as soon as Locke disagrees, be like, screw it, I'm out, because I know what he's trying to say isn't going to be something I like, and I'm done. And so like, it's a, yes, you should always be able to walk away, but don't, all of this stuff can be weaponized. Like, we go back to this underlying thing. We know exactly how to hurt each other the worst. And when we're upset, like you said, acting like big kids, it's really easy to slip into doing what we know is going to be painful because we just got hurt.
Yeah. I don't know, though. I also think that even within that, that can be a hard thing, because sometimes in the moment, and I know that you can relate to this, it's hard being called out on your stuff. Yep. And like, I think it is okay to walk away, because I think there's been times where you've called me out on my stuff and I've walked away and like it's irritated you, but I was able to come back after and be like, yeah, you were right. Like, it made me mad, but if I would have stayed in the conversation, it would have like, I would have like made it somehow about how it's your fault, that whatever you just said about
defensive.
Yeah, I would have gotten defensive. Whereas like, if I walked away, even though you're saying something that I didn't like, it actually ended up good, because I came back and I was like, oh, like I wasn't happy when you said that. It really made me annoyed, but you have a point. Like, yeah, I wasn't seeing it from your perspective. And like, even though I don't feel that like is true, sometimes I don't believe, like, I don't feel what you're saying is true. It doesn't matter what I feel, because you feel it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's not quite what I mean. So what I mean is not, oh, you're not allowed to walk away when you don't like what I have to say. What I mean is like using the walking away as a weapon. So like, that's not true, and then run away before you can hear what I'm saying, is very different than, wow, like that was very blunt, kind of hurt me. There might be a point there. I don't want to scream at Locke, so I'm gonna go think about it. They're two very different situations, right? Like, screw you, I'm done, and then you walk out of the house and drive away. Very different than, all right, we need to talk about this later. So it's back to this idea of it's not that you're trying to walk away, it's how you're trying to walk away that makes it weaponized in my mind.
Do you mean me just like exploding like a volcano at you and then not letting you say what you need to say in return?
Or maybe yes, but it could also be like, there some other examples that I can think of are like, if I try to offer you correction, which is always a touchy subject with both of us. We need to be able to correct each other. We should be able to correct each other. We should be able to receive it, but we're never going to like it. So if I say, hey, the way you just handled that situation with one of the kids or with me, blah, 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 here's why that made me feel like crap. You don't want to hear that. It's perfectly okay for you to be like, okay, whether you say the words or not, I don't really want to talk about this. You go in the kitchen, you get a seltzer and you sit down, you drink it, and 10 minutes later, you're like, I come back, you're like, I appreciate that. That's very different than me saying that and you being like, what the F are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And then stomping upstairs or getting in the car and like, you're just going to go for a drive, get a nice coffee or whatever it is, but not saying that and just driving off.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not always, it's not always that it needs to be actually a big fight. You can weaponize walking away. And it's that, I don't remember which episode, but way back many episodes ago, we talked about being on our high horses as we went through like this healing journey. Sometimes it's that high horse that you're on where you're like, well, I know that this is going to lead to a fight and I'm not going to be able to handle it. And so I need to walk away, and I'm justified in being able to walk away, but you don't explain that to your partner. And it looks to your partner who maybe is the one who is going to follow you or has an abandonment wound or, anxious attachment, whatever one of these terms we like to use. To that person, it feels like you're leaving.
Yeah.
So, all right. Practical step number 1, walking away is totally okay, but there are wrong ways to do it. Another one that I wanted to talk about is, this is something that I've been doing a lot lately in all kinds of different areas, but something that was really helpful for me was actually sitting down. For me, I like to write things out, but you don't have to write it out. You could just visualize it. I basically scripted out the version of me, the ideal version of me, and how he would handle a fight with you. And then I was able to basically try and be an actor stepping into that role when it happened. I was prepared. It was like, basketball player, there's 2 seconds left on the clock. We're down by 1. If your coach draws up a play for you and you're prepared, you have a halfway decent chance of scoring and winning. But if he's like, yeah, I got nothing, or you don't have any timeouts to draw up a play, it's a completely different situation. You got to figure it out in the pressure of the moment. And for me, anytime I try and figure something out in the pressure-filled moment, I'm like 10 times more likely to screw it up. So sitting down and actually having an idea of how the ideal husband version of me would respond to your anger, whether it was warranted or not, would listen as you talked, even though I was really freaking pissed off at you and you were saying some things I didn't like, would stand up for himself when you were being totally rude or insulting or, trying to make a point, but getting sidetracked on personal insults for 30 seconds or whatever it is. Like, how do I think I referenced chess a few minutes ago. How do I actually lead us to resolution in the end, instead of a knockdown, drag out, we're mad at each other for 3 days, you might leave and not come back for a while kind of fight.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I did that ahead of time that I could actually step into that role and start showing up better. And I still have not yet nailed it perfectly, but much, much better when I'm like, okay, this is not how that version of me would act. And I think a lot of people have no clue how they should act. And they hear all these little bits and pieces, and they're like, oh, that sounds good. And yeah, and they're trying to piece together like this 1,000-piece puzzle, and they have 7 pieces put together, and they're trying to finish putting the puzzle together in the middle of the fight instead of having it mostly put together ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think planning is good. What is that saying? Failure to plan is like planning to fail. Mm-hmm. I think that's good. And it's funny because I was laughing because our style of doing things are completely opposite. Yeah. You're a very in-depth journaler. Like, we'd get in fights and you would go journal about it. And like, that is how you would process through that. That is not what I do at all. And like, for me, it has to be like simple, basic, like, where do I go to, and like, who do I want to just be as a person in general? And like, it's a word for me. Like, it's a word, and like, how would I be? How would I show up from this word? Like, who do I need to be? How do I need to act? How do I need to talk? Like, what does this look like for me? And I just need that simple thing to think about and be like, okay, is this reflecting that?
Yeah.
When I show up that way, no, it's not reflecting that, like, at all. It's the direct opposite of the way that I want to be. And so I'm just saying that to make it easier for people, because not everybody's brain.
Not everybody's crazy like me. Is that what you're trying to say?
Like Avatar, like I think about Avatar, what you're kind of saying, and like that's very in depth. Like, some people be like, no, dude, I don't want to do that. It sounds really complicated.
You got me a little sidetracked with the word avatar. I don't like that if you're talking about yourself, and I know exactly what you're talking about. The biggest thing for me, the biggest point here is like, this is a version of yourself. when you say avatar, or like, I think of like ideal customer, like marketing kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's someone else. When you say avatar, it's someone else. It's like you have an online account in whatever it is, and your avatar, well, that means it's not a picture of you. That means it's not you. You're trying to be someone else. I'm not trying to be someone else, and I don't think anybody else should try to be someone else when they do this exercise. Not to get on my soapbox here. It's a version of you. It's just a better version of you.
Yeah.
That's really important. And I know you didn't mean anything otherwise by the word avatar, but I wanted to clarify that. It sounds like you do the exact same thing as me. It's just a much simpler process. And so I think that highlights, we didn't even talk about this beforehand, that highlights, if we both did this separately in our own ways, how important it is to have a vision, whether it's a word like it is for you. And then in the moment you can say, am I being this word? Or for me, it's like a script. It's a character that I'm stepping into to play. I'm an actor playing this version of myself, much more in depth. Whatever it is, anywhere in between, highlights the importance of being clear on how you're going to handle this stuff ahead of time. And what the struggle with that process for me, before we move on, the struggle with that for me was it required me to sit in some painful interactions and fights that we had to see how I had done it wrong. It was a lot easier to get in a fight, do whatever we needed to do to make up, forget about it as quickly as possible because it sucked so bad, and then move on to the rest of our lives. But what that did was it just guaranteed we'd repeat it. Mm-hmm. In order to get this vision on how I wanted to handle it better, I needed to see how I had handled it poorly. And that required some, I want to say embarrassment, but nobody else was there for me to be embarrassed. I was embarrassed in front of myself, I guess, replaying some of the things that I had done, sitting in that discomfort, getting mad at you again, reliving some of the moments. So it was a painful process, but it was a really important process to do.
And also what happens with the not dealing with it is like, not only does it repeat, trust me, we repeated the same fight for like, I don't even know how many years. It was ridiculous. But
I don't know why I'm laughing.
It creates hurt, which then creates resentment, which then creates anger. So there's like a rabbit hole a loop that you get stuck in. There's hurt, there's pain because of words that are said that are hurtful, or things that are done that are hurtful that never get spoken about and get swept under the rug. And then that gets repeated again and again. So then that equals pain, and then there's resentment. So it's like a loop, and you don't just step out of that loop. Like you got to do something radically different to change that. And if you don't change that, then the ending is not good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's different for every situation. That's the problem with this. Like every time I get into a specific argument that we had, or I talk to someone else about an argument they're having, it's a different path out. So I guess I would say, like, if you don't know what to do, you can always reach out to us and we can try and resolve things through some messages. But I have one more practical action, I guess, type thing that I want to talk about. Do you have anything else that helped you get down this path of fighting a little bit better? Not completely fair, but much better than we were? Do you want my last one?
I mean, I think I'll have your last one. I think for me, like, it was just so many different things. Like, you and I have had this conversation a million times. Like, what got us to here? What got us to there? And it's like, you can't just put your finger on something and say, oh, it was that thing that day.
Lots of work.
There's just lots of inner work and like work on our marriage in general, and conversations, like really uncomfortable conversations. These conversations. Yeah. Coffee talk. We were just talking about doing coffee talk when we used to do that. Like lots of conversations where that is what brought out a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. The last thing on my list, and there's a little bit of a story behind it to kind of illustrate it, is just get to the repair faster. Obviously within reason. Don't like you've made very clear, and I think it's important to reiterate, if you guys are still angry, don't try and hash things out and discuss. And I think that's an important point about the repair. The repair doesn't always need to be, okay, now we got to figure out the resolution from this. Resolution and repair are not the same thing in my book. I mean the times where we get into it you take your time apart, I take my time apart, you process, I process. We come back and maybe we're still frustrated, a little bit angry, but we hug and kiss and hold hands, and we make a obvious effort to the other person that we're working to put it behind us instead of holding this grudge for 5 days, which we've done. There was a quote, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but something like, the sign of a good marriage is being angry at each other, disagreeing with each other, and still holding hands. It's like, for us, it's literally holding hands. We hold hands a lot, but it could be metaphorical. And so like getting to the repair faster, and I'll tell you this story really quickly. I told you this story, Ashley, before I wrote a newsletter post about this story. I ran into this older woman in the grocery store, and I was buying you flowers one time, and she was at I don't even know what it is, like the flower stand, whatever it is. And she was getting a bouquet bag to put the wet flowers in so they didn't drip everywhere. And it looked like she was having trouble opening it. And I was like, oh, I'll be a nice guy and I'll ask her if she needs any help, partially because I want to feel like I'm a nice guy from a purely selfish perspective, and even more selfishly because I don't want to stand here and wait. And so I asked her if she needed help. And she had some like one-liner back to me that completely took me back. And it was like, well, not unless you want to bring these flowers out to my husband's grave with me or something like that. And I was like, whoa, like I didn't expect that. So I just kind of smiled at her, and then she started talking to me. And the short version of this story is her husband had been dead for over a year, and she had been bringing him flowers every single day since he had passed. And when she told me that, I was like, oh man, like what kind of relationship, how close must they have been for her to be doing that? She's like, she's clearly not doing it out of guilt or feeling like she has to. And so I asked her, I was like, well, that's what's the secret basically? Like, how did you build a relationship that strong? And her answer really seems incredibly simple, but it plays right into this point of getting to the repair faster. And it was, don't stay mad at each other. It's like, we've heard that so many different times. And it's like, yeah, whatever. Like, I get that. Don't let the sun set on your anger. Don't go to bed angry. Like all of these different ways. But she was talking me kind of through that after that one, that kind of summary of an answer. And she was like, there's so many times I was mad about this. I was mad about that. And the way that she summed it up really hit me. They'd been married for 52 years. And the way that she summed it up was, none of that stuff matters anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, nobody wants to think about their husband or their wife dying. Even after 52 years of marriage, like that's incredible to me, 52 years, but like nobody wants to think about that. But how true is that? That nothing, I mean, I guess there are a few things.
Yeah.
But pretty much nothing is going to matter, is going to be worth being mad about 52 years from now. And so we are fantastic. You and I are fantastic at clinging to our anger and drawing this shit out and making this stupid fight last for no good reason. And it's the little things. It's you putting your hand on my back as you walk by. It's eye contact. It's, a kiss. It's whatever it is. It's these little things that get you to the repair. And that's not the same thing as a resolution. But like, get to the repair faster. It's not worth staying mad about for days. It might still be worth resolving and having another conversation when you're fully calmed down, but you can get to the repair before you even get to the resolution, before you're calmed down.
Well, and I was going to say, it's kind of similar to what you just said, but not everything needs a resolution either. I feel like we make things into a big deal that don't need to be a big deal. So like, for instance, you talk to me, we both can use tones that are not nice. You talk to me in a really quick, not nice tone. I don't like it. I don't always need to be like, why are you talking to me like that? Sometimes that actually makes it worse. Like, why are you talking to me like that? Because then my tone will be not nice and you're already in a bad mood. It will just escalate it. But then like, you talk to me like that, I don't say anything about it. And then you come back and kiss me, but then I don't want to kiss you because you just talked to me like that. And it's like, it goes back to what you said. We could like hold a grudge and stay mad about stupid stuff just because we want to stay mad. And I feel like a lot of times in relationships, we're stubborn or we just want to be mad just to be mad. Yeah. And like, I know that was where I was at for a while. And I also know now, like, there's many times where you've done something that really annoyed me, or you talk to me really rudely, or you talk to one of the kids really rudely, and I just don't want anything to do with you. But like, why am I going to do that? Like, why am I not going to kiss you? Like, I still love you. It's like withholding love. Like, I'm not going to withhold love from you because you just annoyed me. Like, I still love you. I don't have to like be super happy with you at the moment. I could be annoyed with you, but still love you at the same time. Yep. Just like your kids do stupid, annoying stuff all the time. You still should give them love. You should still kiss them and hug them. You still love them, although they're annoying like the majority of the time. But you still love them. It's the same with, why is your husband or your wife any different? Yeah. I also want to add one more thing. And I think this is really important because in a relationship, and this was you and I for a while, you're not both emotionally at the same point. You're not doing the same work, and you're on, I don't want to say different levels, but you're on a different journey than your spouse, and you have to meet your partner where they're at. And if they are not emotionally at a place that can have certain conversations, it makes it tricky. You have to take baby steps and really, really tread lightly. Because if you push your stuff, like them doing work on them, like doing work on themselves, or you think that they should be doing what you're doing, like that just makes it worse. That just makes them want to do it less. I do think there comes a point where like, if you keep on banging your head on the wall and your spouse isn't trying to meet you in the middle, there needs to be a really serious conversation. Because at a certain, I don't know where that point is. I think it's different for everybody. But communication, in my love and communication are the two most important things in marriage. They're the two toughest things. Yeah. They need to be had, because if they're not being done, then like there is no, like, marriage is more than one thing. Like, we're friends, we're lovers. Like, communication needs to be, it needs to be done. And if you can't have the communication ever, then that's tough.
Yeah. In the beginning, I think like finding an external outlet, like a therapist, a coach, a friend, like obviously be careful bitching to your friend about your spouse, but someone that you can talk to about this stuff is important. Because in the beginning, one of the things we did, one of the mistakes we made, to your point, is in the beginning thinking that, like, knowing that we had to have some conversations with someone about what we were feeling, and thinking that, well, Ashley's my best friend, then I guess I'm going to have the conversation with her. Sometimes we weren't ready for those conversations with each other, and it did cause some fights. On the flip side though, and back to what you said about not always having to get to a resolution, I totally agree. A lot of these things don't freaking matter after 3 minutes, never mind 3 days. And that's the point. Like, after 52 years, how stupid is that going to seem? But I do think, and I'll speak from my experience, and you brought this up the other day when we got into a little bit of a fight, and you said something about how, and I think this is a normal tendency for everyone, to dump a whole lot of stuff when they get into a fight. Like, oh yeah, well, if you're going to sling that at me, here's 37 reasons why you suck, right? But you said something about, you never bring this stuff up when we're not fighting. And it was intended constructively. It was like, how about we talk about this when we're not angry with each other? I think that what I do, and why I would urge people to consider, and I'll give you a great question for this, but to consider resolution sometimes, even if one party thinks that maybe it's not worth resolving at all, is what I would do a lot of times is, I'll get mad, we'll get in a fight, I'll feel like you mistreated me, whether you did or not. We'll get to the repair. I'll be like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. And I'll be trying to force that thought into reality and be like, I don't need to bring it up. It's not worth getting into another fight about. What if I don't do it well? What if she doesn't receive it well? Whoever's fault it is. And I sweep it under the rug. And then I start to build, as you referenced earlier, a lot of resentment.
Yeah. And
so sometimes it doesn't need to be resolved, but maybe it should still be talked about. And I'll give you a question for this. And anytime you feel like this is still pissing me off, I think this should be talked about. And you can be like, well, is this going to matter in 52 years? That's a great question. No, of course it won't. But sometimes, even if it won't matter in 52 years, we still need to talk about it. So here's a better question. Will saying this, will discussing this, will bringing this back up, it could even just be, will saying it in this way is another way to phrase it. Will saying this bring us closer together or push us farther apart? So I'm annoyed about what you did last Thursday. It won't matter in 3 days or 3 years, but it's one of those little things that's a running trend. I'm starting to build resentment about this specific topic. This is just the tip of that iceberg. It's really not a big deal, but if I bring this up in the right way, it will actually bring us closer together because you'll understand how I'm feeling. I won't be building resentment. Therefore, it's important. Let's do it. As opposed to, no, this really doesn't matter. Or I'm still so angry about this that no, I shouldn't bring it up because I'm just going to dump on Ashley and it's going to end up pushing us farther apart. So I do think there are times where I have not brought things up to a fault and let it build resentment.
Yeah.
You're looking like you're going to say something.
Well, I'm laughing because the kicker is most of the time, the actual thing that you're fighting about doesn't need to be resolved. It's how you react with the emotion in the fight when you should have just walked away is what needs to be resolved after.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about like just things in our last fight that were said to me that like, I was like, I could have just let go and been like, well, he was mad. But at the same time, I was like, but I thought that I had gotten better. And if I had just ignored it, I would have gotten really hard and down on myself and then angry at you. If I hadn't been like, well, I thought I'd gotten better at this, but you said I hadn't in the fight. Like, is that true? Do you really feel that way? Because if you feel that way, then I need to do more work, or like, I'm seeing this differently than you. Because it's just so interesting, the difference in perspective. Like, we're just different people. We have different perspectives. And sometimes our fights are just, the way that we're viewing things are just complete opposite. And like, we can come to an understanding just from knowing the other person's view of things and not looking at it like you're trying to attack me, looking at it through the lens of like, your brain and your eyes are just way different than mine. Yeah,
absolutely.
So
one last thing I wanted to go back to, and then we're done. Completely not off topic, but completely off the topic we were just talking about. You said something as an example, like, why are you talking to me like that? When you're referencing tone of voice. I just want to give a really quick tip on that. Stop, not you. Well, yes, you and me and everyone listening. There are going to be times where you need to set boundaries. We should just do a boundaries episode, like how to, like, let's just like role play and do some dialogue, whatever. There are going to be times where you need to set boundaries. You need to stand up for yourself. Somebody's giving you a crap tone of voice and you need to, call them out on it. Don't ask, why are you talking to me like that? Instead, say, and appropriately, nicely, firmly, but nicely, stop talking to me like that. Or can you please stop talking to me like that? Because when you say why, and this is, this because you've lived with me, I'm the world's best arguer. When you say why, I will give you 25 freaking reasons why I'm talking to you with this tone of voice, Ashley. And they all seem justified to me because I'm in the moment talking. So you're actually setting me up for failure. When you say, why are you talking to me like this? It's an invitation for me to get defensive. And I'm going to take it because you've made me uncomfortable by calling me out that I'm talking to you inappropriately. So I will try to justify it. And I think almost everyone listening can relate to that. So just get rid of the why. Don't ask them to explain themselves. Give them a soft exit by removing the why and just saying, hey, please stop talking to me like that. And then moving right on. Because if you say why, then it's like, okay, choose your weapon. Like, I'll take a sword. You take a pistol. Like, we're going to fight this out because you've given them the invitation. So quick tip, don't say, why are you talking to me like that? Just tell them to stop nicely.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. On that note, we're done.
Thanks, friends. Hi, friends. If you're enjoying the show, would you please leave a quick rating or review on Apple Podcasts for us? Doing this helps more people find the podcast, which means even more people can benefit from the conversations. We really appreciate you and your time, and thanks, as always, for listening.